One of my favorite things in the world to do is watch Friends. I know it's been off for years and years. It's not even around, but I still find myself binge watching old episodes. And I was thinking about this today and thinking, it's the predictability of the friends in the circle, right? You have Chandler with his quirkiness, Monica with her type A of just everything has to be so neat and tidy and organized. It's Phoebe's ability to make you laugh at her silly songs. Ross always comes in with those smart comments, and Joey and him and his food, like it is just so hilarious. And of course, Rachel, she just brings everybody together, and it's just such this beautiful, cohesive team of people. And it's why I wanted to come on and share with you today that I have an opportunity for you to find your friends in the content creation space. So if you are thinking about creating your first or your next digital course, I don't want you to miss this opportunity because Amy Porterfield just opened the doors for registration for her Course Confident Bootcamp. And I'm actually offering a special bonus for anyone that registers for the Course Confident Bootcamp through my special link. So I want you to go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register. That's crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And what you're going to find when you get there is I have this special bonus private podcast series. It's called Money Mindset for Creators. So I want you to go register for Amy's bootcamp, download the podcast, and immediately start listening to it, because what this training is set up to do is to help you get your mind right about monetizing your content, making money so that you can fuel your content creation dreams. So go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register for Course Confident. And I cannot wait for you to find your friends and find the people that will be there for you. Do you see what I did there? Yeah, nice little friends segue connection. Go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And I cannot wait to see you inside. Okay, let's get into today's episode. One of the questions I get asked all the time is, how did you get started on your podcast journey? It's one of those things that we typically do as hosts when we want to know more about the guest and we want to know where they came from and how they got to where they are today or what their journey looked like. And that is why I'm so excited about today's guest, because having the idea of the accidental entrepreneur and unapologetically chasing something that no one else around you is doing is what I live for. It is what I live for, because if I look back at my own journey, I would have never connected any of the dots. I wouldn't have. It's only in hindsight can I look back and say, oh, that makes sense why I am where I am today. But there was no roadmap going forward. There was never a time when I was in high school, let's say, and planning my college degree. Like, what do I want to do when I grow up? Podcaster was never on the list, ever. Ever, ever, ever. Nor was like a radio DJ or someone that was on a microphone or behind the camera. Like, this was not in the plan. It was all by accident, and it was all happy accidents and learning from mistakes and going through processes that I would have never otherwise have journeyed through had I not been curious and wanted to explore the different creative ideas that I have. So that is what's so special about today's guest, Amanda, because she is on a mission to help accidental entrepreneurs unapologetically chase their definition of success. As a natural-born encourager who shares stories of triumph and hardship, she never wants others to feel alone in this journey, and you are going to love my chat with her. So let's get right to it. Welcome to the Profit Podcast, where we teach you how to start, launch, and market your content with confidence. I'm your host, Crystal Profit, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks for hanging out with me today, because if you've been trying to figure out the world of content creation, this is the show that will help be your time-saving shortcut. So let's get right to it, shall we? All right, Profit Podcast listeners, I'm so excited for today's guest because she's going to tell us how to be more unapologetic. So welcome to the show, Amanda.
Oh, thank you, Crystal. I am so excited to be here today.
Oh, this is so fun. So I love your brand. I love this so much because I think that we apologize way too much about all kinds of, and when I say we, it's the collective, like female business person or mom or whatever category you find yourself in, that you're constantly apologizing. Like, oh, I was trying to do this, but I'm sorry I didn't do this. And I love the idea of being unapologetic. So can you tell us where that comes from in your own journey?
Oh, this is so good. So this is the first time someone's asked me this question. And I share it a little bit on my podcast, but this is the first interview where I get to talk about it. So this is very exciting for me. And the word unapologetic actually came up as my word of the year. So I don't know if you or anyone listening does the whole word of the year thing, but I started it several years ago, and I started, I would declare a word. And I think the first year I didn't even remember the word by the end of the year. Like it was like, I kind of had to figure out how to make it work. And I'm trying to think of how it originally came up. Oh, here it is. So what happened is I went on this journey, and I promise all of this leads together, but in 2021, I was not going to hit a goal. I was very close to hitting a financial goal in my business, but I wasn't going to hit it. And my business coach was like, why the heck are you so worried about hitting this particular number? Like, you've done so great in business. Like, this year has been successful. Like, what's going on here about hitting this specific number? And I'll call attention to it. It was the magic 6 figures, right? Of like, yeah. And everyone was talking about it that year. It seemed like all the titles of every blog post or podcast or whatever was 6 figures, 6 figures. And I looked at him and I was like, well, I just feel like that's the next thing that I need to hit. Like, that's the number I need to hit. And he was like, Amanda, you're so close. Like, I appreciate how driven you are, but why do you want to hit that number so badly? And the answer was really because I think that's the next thing I should hit, right? Like, that was it. And so fast forward, I'm trying to figure out my definition of success, right? Yeah. And so all year 2022 on my podcast, I interviewed people and asked them about success. And I just kind of went on this journey of asking about success, trying to figure it out. And then I had someone say to me that they unapologetically chased money until a certain time, and then they chased something else. And that word, when I heard that word, I like that phrase of I unapologetically chased, I thought, that's what I want to do. That's 100% what I want to do in life. And I want everyone that I work with to do the same thing. I don't care what the end of that sentence is. I just want them to unapologetically chase it. And so that then just kind of led into all of this. It became my word of the year. I changed the name of my podcast. It was actually something different, which I know you have a similar story of that too, yes. Of like changing the name. And so I changed the name of the podcast to the Unapologetic Entrepreneur. And I don't know about you when you changed your podcast name, but I had all the feelings like everyone's going to be mad at me. It's going to be confusing. Like I made it into this big freaking deal. And what happened almost immediately was people said things like you did. Amanda, I love this idea of unapologetic. Like it really started to resonate with people. And I just fully embraced it and embodied it. And so here we are.
Oh my gosh. I'm so glad that you talked about the rebranding of your podcast, because I know that so many people like we have this pressure, and there's a few things to unpack, right? The pressure that we feel in the industry, whether it's, your first 1,000 email subscribers, your first
Yes.
1,000, downloads, like the first 6-figure, not even just year, your first 6-figure month. Like, when are you going to do that? And it's like, hang on, like, can we take a time out for a second and just admit that that's all really freaking hard. Like, we're here to say that is, and I don't want to say it's impossible, because there are those unicorns out there, but it's not the norm. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We're here to like, we're unveiling the curtain. That is not the norm. That is not what has happened in my business. It's not what I'm assuming has happened in your business either. Like, I'm sure there's so many stories that you can unpack, but I just love the concept of unapologetically doing whatever it is that you're doing, which is why I love this brand name so much. I love that you changed your podcast to it, because it's very clear right off the bat who your audience is and who, like, the underlying message. And that's hard to do with 3 words, like unapologetic entrepreneur. It's so hard to sum up everything, but it does it so beautifully. So I just wanted to highlight that. I think it's fantastic.
Thank you for that. I will take that. And you are so right. It is hard. And I would also say to anyone listening, like, this is like at that point of the change, it was 3 years into my podcasting journey, or close to that amount of time. And so I am trying to, I was listening to your recent podcast at the time of you and I talking, like it was a podcast on like your 400th episode, which, by the way, congratulations.
Thank you.
On 400 episodes. That's amazing. And I was thinking about starting the podcast, and like, I was, as I was hearing you talk about it, I was reflecting, and oh my gosh, the amount of like fear that I had of starting. And I remember looking at so many podcasts and seeing, 300 episodes, 100 episodes, 1,000 episodes, like all of these high numbers. And I had this moment one day where I thought, well, I can't get to 302 if I don't have one. And so I just like pushed through the fear and hit go. But all of that to say, I picked a different name for the podcast, and it was very clear what it was, but it changed, and that's okay. Like, I think in that moment, I was so worried about picking the perfect one, and I appreciate the kudos now, of that. I really feel like I have landed on it now. I don't anticipate there being another change. Maybe there is, I don't know. But at that point when I started, I'm so grateful to 2019 Amanda, who didn't just get paralyzed by that of picking the perfect name.
I love this so much because, and this is what I was going to say earlier, is there's so many people listening that are just getting started, and they have that pressure of, it's got to be a perfect name. It has to be this. It needs to be that. It has to have perfect sound. I have to have amazing guests. And like, I mean, we could just go on and on about all the things that we believe are supposed to be perfect, quote unquote, perfect at the beginning of our journey. But Amanda and I are here to tell you, you can pivot, you can change, you can have longer episodes, shorter episodes, solo, and like, I mean, there's just so many variables that go into podcasting and just content creation in general. And I want to have people come onto my show that have stories like that. I mean, I love Amy Porterfield. She's one of my mentors. She's fantastic.
Same. So good.
But also, I mean, her podcast, she has a whole team of people behind her. And I have to call this out all the time, because people will come to me and say, I want an Amy Porterfield podcast, and I want it to be just like Jenna Kutcher's, right? Like, everyone always comes in, and I'm just like, hang on, let's back up. Like, she's literally been doing this for over a decade. Like, she's been podcasting for a decade, and she doesn't share enough about, she shares about starting her business a lot, but she doesn't share the ins and outs of what it took to start her podcast and the real struggles of like, oh, it's really awkward. Like, she talks about being awkward on video, but not enough of behind the scenes. So I love to have people come on my show and give you the real, like, Amanda's giving us the real deal about starting. And I so appreciate that. So thank you.
I am definitely here for it. And I try to do that every single day in my business because there was a day that really changed. There was a specific moment. It was more than just a day. It was a specific moment that I realized I need to share more about all of these things, about the thoughts, about the fears, about the mistakes, about all of it. When I had someone, no one can see us when they're listening to this, but behind me there's shelves. I used to not have the beautiful shelves that I have right now, but I had these wooden shelves on the wall before. And I remember this moment. I'm on a coaching call with a group of people, and I'm talking about something, and I don't even remember what the topic was, but I was coaching on something. And I did not realize that people thought that I had a team of people behind me. Now, I do have support in my business. I'm not saying I'm doing this all alone. That would be a lie. But at that time, I don't even think I had anyone. Like maybe I had the podcast editor, which by the way, I did not start with an editor. So if you go listen to episodes 1 through something, you'll know poor Amanda, she was just trying her best.
Like she just E for effort. That's all we care about.
She was just trying. But here I am coaching on something, and someone says, well, Amanda, but we don't have the same thing you do. Like, who dusts the shelves behind you? And I thought, me.
Yeah.
I'm the podcast host. I'm the coach. I'm the janitor. I'm the technician. I'm everything in this business. And it was in that moment that I realized, simply because I present well, of organized, like it seems very buttoned up, that people just assumed I had a team behind me, including someone cleaning my office, which I was like, I wish I had someone doing all these things, but I dust the shelves. And it was such an eye-opening moment. And from then on, I have always been even more open about the start of anything, because I think we all do it. We look towards people and we just assume, gosh, they've got it all together. They've got it all figured out.
Being a woman in business comes with its own unique set of challenges, but also so many opportunities. We get ahead by leaning in to what makes us different from business as usual. I'm Samantha Hartley, host of Profitable Joyful Consulting, inviting you to a special 6-episode series exploring the experience of being a woman in business. You want to hear from women consultants who've hit $1 million, who sell 6-figure engagements, or who've broken their own revenue ceilings? Yeah, those are my clients, and they'll be sharing too. Join me for 6 must-listen episodes that tackle key challenges for women consultants.
Follow Profitable Joyful Consulting on your favorite podcast app.
I think it's like, I think back to, I've had several comments very similar to what you're saying, where people are like, well, you started with an audience, or you started with this, like it's something to do with having like an advantage over them. And I'm like, no. Hang on, like pull up a chair, grab your coffee, because I'm going to tell you about just figuring it out. Because it's literally what I did. And the way that I've kind of moved through my business is understanding that I had the same mentality towards my mentors. I was like, they got it together. They don't have dumb questions like me. Like I'm an idiot and I can't figure this out. And so I remember that about my audience. And to your point, I love sharing those behind the scenes and the stories, the messy stories, because that's the humanity. At this point when we're recording it, everybody talks about AI and AI is coming to steal everything. And, no, there's nothing, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, calm down, like, stop clutching your pearls, everybody, because if you have the stories like Amanda and I are sharing, and you can offer that vulnerability and keep just being honest and real with your audience. Like I have, do you have any story that you've shared specifically on your podcast that someone sent you an email or sent you a DM and was like, thank you so much, Amanda, for sharing that with me?
Oh gosh, I have several. The first one that pops into my mind is when I had a tech meltdown. So I'm happy to share the story because it's a freaking nightmare. I mean, it'll make everyone feel like, oh, well, if she made it through that, like we're okay. So I had this tech meltdown on I'll share the story. but I decided to record a podcast episode before I figured out the answer, because I had this moment and it was a true meltdown. Like, again, I'll share in a minute, but I was having this meltdown and I wasn't like audibly crying on the podcast episode, and I'll make sure to send you the link so you can link it in the show notes.
Yeah.
But I got through the issue, meaning the issue happened, but I didn't figure out, like, I didn't have a solution for the issue, but I calmed myself down enough and I thought, this is what my people deal with. This is what everyone who's connected to me deal with this situation. And instead of me waiting to figure it out and then share what I did, I'm going to share how I feel before I figure it out. So I went into the closet, I recorded a podcast episode, and you can hear it. And I get messages about that one all the time. That's probably the biggest one. But I share a lot of small stories, which you'll laugh at this because you totally know. Like, I'll share a story in a podcast episode, and that might have been 3 years ago or 2 years ago. And I have no idea what episode this person listened to, but it's in there somewhere. So I do share stories. But the quick version of the tech issue was that I was recording a new course at the time, and I had set all the tech up, the fancy camera, the lighting, the teleprompter, like all the fancy things, which I don't use all the time at all. Like, this is like the one time I was using it. I get it all set up. I feel like a champ. One woman show. So excited that I got this figured out. I record about 5 hours of content for this course.
I'm cringing.
So it's a very uncomfortable situation. And I am so proud of myself, Crystal. I mean, I was like, it's lunchtime and I have nailed this. Like, I was so proud of all the prep work I did because of so many stories before that it has been a nightmare recording all these things. And I was just so proud. Well, I got the video card out, put it in the computer, and it was out of focus.
Oh
yeah.
My God.
I immediately started crying audibly. Like, I tell this story in my book, and I've told it on the podcast before. I use the word yell. I am not really like a super screamer, but it was audible enough that my husband in another room heard the situation that was happening. And he got off a work call and came in. Like, it was enough that it was such a difference. So anyways, I didn't have the answer so the podcast episode, I recorded it. I didn't know what was going to happen with me recording this course. So that's like, you get that moment. And I say, I have no idea what tomorrow is, but here's what I feel today.
Gosh, I'm so sorry that happened. Like I said, I'm like cringing. My skin is crawling. I was thinking that it was going to be completely blank. Like the camera had shut off like 2 seconds after you started recording. I mean, like I've lived through a million of these nightmares myself. And so I think it's so good that you share that, especially because I'm sure your audience is like, Amanda is human and she makes mistakes. And here she is, like, because as of us recording this, you have 186 episodes of your podcast. And so people are like, she's got everything together. Like, she hit that 100, like she's about to hit 200 episodes. Like, she is pro. She knows everything, but we still make mistakes. We make so many mistakes. And if you have made a mistake recently, you're listening to this, you're welcome to the club. Come on, join, pull up a seat. You're welcome here. You are welcome here. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Well, I wanted to kind of transition into another thing that, we had talked about, someone on your team, and we were actually talking about, we have to give a shout out to Jessica. Jessica, I hope that you're listening to this because she is fantastic. Her pitch for Amanda to be on this podcast, it's the best pitch I've given all year. There you go, Amanda.
Jess.
I mean, it was
We're just clapping you up, Jess.
Yes, like it was so fantastic. But what she did, and so I love giving y'all behind the scenes. Like, she had such a great reference to a recent podcast episode, and it was genuine. We're not asking for much. It was genuine. It was a genuine reference to something that made sense. Like, that's all. That's all we're asking for. Oh my gosh. But
yes.
But she did talk about, this idea of, what if this doesn't work out? And I was like, oh my gosh, please come and talk to my audience, because there's so many people that have either just started their podcast or they're about to start their podcast. And I know, because I was there too, the number one question that is going through their mind is, what if no one listens to this podcast? Like, what if my mom is the only person that tunes in on day one? Like, and again, with the cringiness, it makes my heart sink. It makes me so sad to think that people have this thought and feeling, because I've had it too. So what advice do you have someone that's trying to move through that? Like, what if things don't work out the way that they're, quote, supposed to?
Oh, the first thing is I would say, if I was with you and you're a hugger, I would hug you. Like that first and foremost, because I just have so much compassion for those feelings, because I can say, yes, I felt all of that, when I was starting my podcast. And I will also say, with whatever comes next in my business, I will have those same feelings every time I start something new. So it doesn't, like, I actually have things that I would say that are not super fun, but they are super honest. Mm. So number one, that fear of what if it doesn't work out? What if no one buys the thing? What if no one listens? What if, like, those thoughts will likely not stop. Like, we will always have those. And I don't say it to say, like, you're doomed forever. Like, I don't mean it in that way. I just mean we have to learn to deal with it, because if we don't, those feelings can paralyze us. Mm-hmm. So we have to know. And I think it's always helpful to know, like, oh, if I expect that this is going to show up every time, I can figure out how to navigate that. I can have a plan. The second part is, this is the not fun part that I get to say as well, is it's very likely that it's going to come true at first. So what if no one listens to episode number 1? It's very likely that will come true. And there's a reason for it. It's because when we have that fear of what if no one listens, we will probably not tell anyone about the thing. And therefore no one will even have the chance to listen. And so it's so likely that it's going to come true. And that is what breaks my heart, because when it does come true, then so many people stop doing it. I think it was your podcast. I'm pretty sure I think it was that podcast that Jess was like, because she reached out to me. She was like, you got to listen to this podcast episode. And I was like, oh my gosh. So then I binged part 1 and part 2 of that. And then so many more episodes of your podcast. And I loved it so much, but there was something that you said about going to listen notes to find out what.
Oh, yes.
Like, the fact that my podcast is in the top 1.5% of podcasts. Like, I was like, I don't even know how to take this information, because that doesn't make any sense. But what it tells me is that so many people start a podcast. They don't have the listenership that they wish they did. And so they stop. And so all of that of, like, what if no one listens? I think we almost set ourselves up for failure when we lean into those fears. Because it's so easy for no one to listen at first. You just have to keep going when we're talking about a podcast, or if you are opening up a different offering or a product in your business or whatever. Like, again, chances are no one will buy it if you don't tell them about it. And so that it's such an easy thing to fall into.
Yeah, I think the self-fulfilling prophecy, and this is such a weird, when you were talking about, you're kind of like self-sabotaging in a way by having that. I don't know if you watch the show Schitt's Creek.
I've seen a little. I really need to watch it more, because everyone keeps telling me, like, how funny it is. And I was like, I need to, like, get back into it.
Well, I was just thinking, there's this one point, they were launching a store, like an actual storefront, and they were going to have this big opening, and he was questioning everything. He was like, well, we're going to have like a soft launch with friends and family only, and we're going to give them a discount. And the mom was like, this sounds so sad. Like, it sounds like you're self-sabotaging. Like it's not even like putting it out there. Like, you want more people to come and not give any discounts. So you have this big grand opening, and the dad was like, yeah, you need fireworks and all this other stuff. And he was like, no, 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 no. We want like minimal people, like exclusive, no one there. But that's immediately what I thought of, is this idea of, let's just keep it small. Let's just keep it small. That way, if I do fail, it's not as detrimental, maybe to my ego or to my platform or my business. Like, and I throw all these out here just to know, first of all, like, you're not alone. If you've had all these thoughts and feelings, like, that's what they are. They're just your thoughts. And I love the idea of what you were saying is like, sometimes we just kind of have to listen to the hard things that Amanda is telling us and accept that it's not always going to be that way. And why don't we go ahead and start looking towards like that first milestone that you're going to hit? Like, if you're so worried about that, the very first listen, because did you do this too when your podcast launched? Did you just refresh your stats? I tell everybody that this is totally normal. Like, just hit the refresh button over and over.
Yes. And it's so funny because I think about, like, I could point to so many different times, like the start of the podcast, when I launched my website, my email list, right? When I got the first person that I didn't know their name or whatever. We have these things, but then I think about how I'm going to use the term ridiculous that is, because now if you said, Amanda, how many times do you check your podcast downloads? I'm like, it's rare.
Right.
Right. Like it's there's a system to checking your stats and looking, like, you need to know the data, but by no means do I click that button. Like the other day I saw the total and I was like, oh, that's really exciting. Like
nice.
It had been that long in between. Again, I'm a data nerd, so I have routines for when I look at things, but it's certainly not all the time anymore, because that is just not helpful.
Yeah, 100%. And I look at podcasting, it's so different than other platforms because people can say, well, I have this many downloads and I have this and that. And I'm like, but are your people actually engaged? Like, are they actually listening? Are they pinging you on Instagram and saying, I love this? Are they sharing screenshots? Are they emailing you? Are they buying your products? Like, there's so many other variables that go into the quote success of a podcast. And so I love that, kind of just laying it all out there as it's kind of a choose your own adventure for how you want to define success. And I love that you're in the top, what did you say? Top 1.5? Yes, that's fantastic. That's
awesome. I was super excited about that. And so I kind of did a little digging on that. Yeah. I don't know how much I can't remember, maybe you even shared a little bit about this, but I was listening to or reading something and it was like, what qualifies that is like more than X number of episodes, which I want to say is like 25.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which like to me, and you know what? This is such an interesting point. So I was talking to my husband, Michael, about this at some point, and I was like, and I'm in the 1.5 and this is what this means. And I was like, but like, I don't even know if I want to say the top 1.5 because I don't feel like it's that hard to get into. Like now that I'm hearing these stats. And he caught that so quickly. And I am so grateful that he did, because he said, Amanda, I think you're forgetting how hard it was for you to start. And to like, you have a rhythm now because you're almost 200 episodes in.
Yeah.
It feels real easy now. But it did not at the beginning. And I was so thankful for him reminding me of that, because he was right. It was really hard to figure out the process, to not be so fearful. I remember like listening to the episode like 5 or 6 times before I would schedule it. And now I don't listen to it at all.
Yeah.
Before it goes out.
Yeah. I think this is so helpful for everybody to hear, because the things that are so big in the beginning, it's kind of like you shared. It's like, I'm so grateful for 2019, Amanda, for just doing things and putting things out there. But there are things that we forget about along the journey, because then once we hit certain milestones, we're always reaching for the next thing. And so it is kind of plays into that like self-sabotaging too. It's like, well, I got to be a six figure, and I got to have 1 million downloads. Like I haven't hit 1 million downloads on my podcast. I'm not even close. Like, let's
Me
just
either,
throw
by
that
the
out
way.
there. So I want to throw that out there because people have this misconception of, if you look at the top 0.5% of podcasts, they're getting 1 million to 50 million downloads a month. And so everything, we need to like chart the bell curve of like what is actually in the middle, because it is not that much, y'all. Like it's really not when you look at the big scheme of things. So I love that you share that, because I think that it's just so important to be honest about these pieces of your story. But I actually want to go back to you just launched a book. You're launching a book. Like this is a whole other thing. This is a whole layered thing. So before I ask about launching a book, I just want to know, are you a writer? Because people ask me this all, like, are you a trained writer? Do you have an English degree? Did you write as a kid and say, one day I want to be an author? Like, what is your book writing journey been like?
That's a fantastic question. Again, first time I've been asked this so far. And it's funny, like you said, are you a writer? And immediately my brain said, no. Like it was a absolute hard stop. No. And did I go to was English my degree? Absolutely not. Like all of these answers are no. And I never, this is one of those things that's interesting what my brain does. And I think a lot of us do this I almost start apologizing, coming back to that word, for like writing a book has never been on my list of like dreams to do. And there's people that have this dream and they talk about it all the time. People talk about, oh, I have a dream of writing a book. And gosh, if that's you, please take the first step today, because you can totally do this. You can do this. It's one step at a time. And so I almost catch myself apologizing because it was not a lifelong dream of mine to write a book. Mm-hmm. It came into play when I stepped into entrepreneurship. So my journey before that was in the corporate world. Graduated grad school, went into the corporate world, thought I was going to climb the corporate ladder. I was on the way, right? Like that was my plan, was to be a top executive. Like I was ready for it. Come to find out, I love being an entrepreneur. Don't want to go back to the corporate world. And I love this land that I chose to live in. But when I started to learn about entrepreneurship, I started reading all the books and listening to all the podcasts. Like that was how I learned everything. I didn't go to business school. These are things like I just learned one Google search, one book, one podcast episode at a time, and, took one step and figured it out along the way, like you said. And at that point, I thought, oh, it'd be pretty cool to write a book one day, because I saw how helpful it was. Same thing with podcasting. I thought, oh, maybe it'd be really cool to have a podcast one day. So I started the podcast in 2019. Come to find out, I love podcasting like you. Like, if I could just do this all day, like, what a freaking dream.
Right.
Talking to people is like the best thing for me. So I ended up loving this. And along the way, I thought maybe one day I'll write a book. It's never been on a vision board. I've never put it as a formal goal, nothing. Well, in 2022, a writing program really kind of showed up in my lap. It was one of those, like, I was introduced to it for a few different people, and I was like, I think I need to pay attention to this.
Yeah.
Again, it was not part of my plan. I'm such a planner. I was like, how am I going to fit this in? But it just felt like the right time. And it was the right program for me. So I went through a program to help me, because I don't know anything about publishing a book.
Yeah.
And I just followed the steps and followed the plan, one tiny step at a time. And the longer version of the story that I'll try and keep really short is it ended up being a really difficult time. And so there was a lot going on with my business. So my business has got all this stuff going on. We moved my father-in-law in to be his caregiver, my husband and I, for a little bit of time. And it was all when I started writing this book. And so I had kind of just like the least opportune time for me to write a book is when it started happening.
Right.
Like it all things just did not align. But you know what? I I just told myself to take one step at a time. And I just gave myself the permission, like, do what you can. And if you don't finish the program, you can go through it again, because family is always first, right? Like that was the answer. But it ended up being a pretty cool experience that I finished the book in 3 months, the first draft, which is pretty remarkable.
Yes.
And here we are almost a year later that it's going to be published in June. And it's such an interesting story that, like, when you really set a goal, when you really want to do something and you prioritize it, like, it's amazing what is actually possible.
Oh my gosh. So tell everybody, what is the name of your book?
The name of the book is Why Not You? An Accidental Entrepreneur's Guide to Success.
Oh, I love this. I love this so much. And when is it coming out?
June 2023.
June.
So I don't have a specific date. A whole other thing about publishing, like, I think the big name publishers are able to work with Amazon, et cetera, and get a specific date.
Yeah.
Not everyone is. And so June 2023 is what I got for you.
Perfect. Yeah, this is awesome. It's awesome because actually, I think when this episode goes live, it will be out into the world. So we will make sure and have links to it and have everything for you to connect with Amanda, because I mean, again, the word unapologetic. I mean, I can only imagine, because I've written 2 books. I can only imagine
So awesome.
the wanting to apologize to everyone and everything throughout this whole process, whether you're apologizing to your family, you're apologizing to your book, right? Because your book is actually a living, breathing thing, like once you get going.
Yes.
And so like, I could just imagine that being the through line of everything. And again, you're just such a great example of, let's just do it my way and not the way that, even probably, the person in the course or, the educator that you're following, they probably had a specific plan laid out and you're like, okay, most of this works for me, but really I'm going to adapt this and move it to my, frame of reference or my perspective. So
absolutely. Everything in the whole book is, like, you can imagine, it's number one. I've been told a million times, like, you're the most encouraging person I've ever met. So everything is encouraging of like what I say, why not you? I'm like, you can do this. I believe in you, even if you don't believe in yourself. Like, I'll believe in you first. But there also is very actionable steps laid out, but every single one of them includes find what works for you. Use this process to figure out what works for you, because I want you to unapologetically use whatever works for you, because that's the only thing that matters.
Oh, we all need this book. We all need this book. I think it's a fantastic. So what's coming out in the summer? I'm like, okay, you're going to be by the pool. You're going to be at the beach. You're going to be traveling.
I'm going to run a summer book club for sure.
Okay, awesome. We will have to make sure and connect with you, Amanda. This is I want to switch gears real fast because we have a segment that we do for all of our interviews. So are you up for some rapid fire questions?
Let's do it.
Okay, awesome. So the first one I have is, what piece of advice would you give to a brand new podcaster?
Hit publish. This is the first thing that came to mind, is just go.
Just go. Just go. That's awesome. The second one is a 2-part question. So what is the dream podcast you would love to be on? And who is your dream podcast guest?
Oh gosh, limiting that to just one is really difficult, Crystal. I'm sure everyone says that. I think my dream podcast I would want to be on, and the person I'd want to interview, is possibly the same. Like, okay. Oh, it's so hard. Like, I feel so much pressure right now of thinking of who I want to say, because I'm really debating between 2 people. But I'm going to go with Mel Robbins. Awesome. I really love Mel Robbins. I think I'd love to do a podcast swap.
She is incredible. And I think that y'all have that same motivation vibe. Like, y'all could, I feel like you're kind of the softer version. Maybe we just saw that here today. I feel like you're a little bit softer, but maybe you got some toughness under the skin to really give it like Mel does. I think that'd be fantastic.
Yeah. So if anyone knows Mel, please let me know.
Yes, exactly. We're putting this out into the universe. Like, this is Amanda's calling card to make that happen. Okay. Then my last question is, do you consider yourself a perfectionist?
Yes, but a recovering one.
Good. There's a lot of those in this audience. And again, it's one of those like pull up the seat, like pull up a chair. You're all welcome here because I think that we all have a little bit of that in us. And I think that especially when it comes to content creation, like it kind of dissipates over time. Like to your point, you used to listen to things 5 times. Now it's like, I don't even listen to it at all. Like I have other things to do and move forward with. So I think that that's fantastic. Amanda, this has been so much fun. We're going to have links to everything, but where is the best place for people to connect with you if they want to learn more?
Absolutely. So my website is amandamckinney.com. So you can find everything there. But I will say that I don't know at the time of this recording if it will be happening live or if it'll be a recording of that live, but I am going to host in June of 2023 a live workshop. It'll be free on defining success for yourself, because that is one of the pillar pieces in the book. And I think that if we can define success for ourselves, then everything else gets a little bit easier to focus on instead of focusing on what everyone else is telling us to do. So I would love for anyone to either join me live or see the replay of that. And it'll be at amandamckinney.com/success.
Awesome. Awesome. Everybody go grab her book, go to her workshop, and go hang out on Amanda's podcast. Like we don't ever have to just choose one podcast. This is what I love about this space. You can go subscribe to 1 million podcasts, but go listen to the Unapologetic Entrepreneur because it's so good. It's so good. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Amanda.
Thank you, Crystal. It's been so fun.
Like I said earlier, one of my favorite things about podcasting is just being able to dive into the little nuggets of people that you meet in this network. Because had I not stumbled into podcasting, I would not be here talking to you today and interviewing experts like Amanda, who is doing incredible things on her journey. And had she not gotten curious and started working through different creative ideas that she had and looking at ways to help people, neither one of us would be here talking to you and sharing all the different stories that we've had on our journeys. So I just want to say again to Amanda, thank you so much for sharing your message. I hope that you go listen to her podcast and go check out her book. We're going to have a link to all of Amanda's stuff and the cool things that she's doing in the show notes. So be sure to check those out wherever you are listening to this podcast. And if this is your first time tuning in, make sure you hit that follow or subscribe button. And I would love it if you would take a screenshot and share it on Instagram. Tag me, tag Amanda, and let us know what you thought about today's episode. But that's all I have for you today. So as always, remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. Hey, Profit Podcast listeners. Thanks for sticking around to a little bit after the episode to hear this special message because I want to hear from you. We are starting a new segment called Fan Mail Shoutouts, and I want to hear from you and I want to hear your questions. What do you want to know? What questions have you been dying to ask me? So here's how to make this happen. Go to the app where you're listening to this podcast right now. Go there. I'll wait a second. Okay. Now, once you're there, you're going to see a hyperlink at the top of the episode description that says, send Crystal a text message. And that's all I want you to do. Send me a text. It could be casual, informal. It could be totally anonymous. Or if you want, you can include your name and the name of your podcast or content wherever you are creating, and I will give you a special shout out in an upcoming episode. So again, go to the show notes for where you're listening to this episode right now, and it will say, send Crystal a text message. And I cannot wait to hear from you and give you a shout out in an upcoming segment of Fan Mail Shoutouts.